Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar entitled How Faith Communities Can Help Tackle the Housing Crisis. My name is Dr. Jim O'Farrell and I'm a member of Bothell United Methodist Church, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Today we're going to cover in the next 45 minutes a brief background on the affordable housing crisis here in the Puget Sound region. And in doing this, we'll be hearing from three experts who will be sharing their perspective on how faith communities can positively impact this crisis. And one thing I'd like to share with you right now is that if you do have an interest in this learning about faith communities and the impact that faith communities can have on affordable housing, our team of experts here are available to conduct one-on-one discussions about the best practices, tips, tricks, techniques to help you get started on your affordable housing initiative journey. So let's get started with some introductions here. First of all, I'd like to introduce Reverend Kristen Joyner. Kristen
Hello.
is an avid community networker and organizer advocating for housing solutions. She's a community advisory board member for a regional coalition for housing, and she serves on the Housing, Homelessness, and Shelter Committee for the North Urban Human Services Alliance. Her skills include volunteer management, intercultural relationship building, and public speaking. She has a Master of Arts in Ministry, Leadership, and Service from the Claremont School of Theology, and a Bachelor of Arts in Human Services from Western Washington University. Good afternoon, Kristen.
Good afternoon.
Also joining us today is Jess Blanche. Jess is a Senior Program Director at Enterprise Community Partners. ECP is a national nonprofit whose mission is to make home and community places of pride, power, and belonging. Her team at Enterprise Community Partners Pacific Northwest is focused on catalyzing the development of affordable homes co-located with community serving facilities. And she leads the Enterprise Faith-Based Development Initiative right here in the Pacific Northwest. She is a registered architect in the state of Washington and holds a Master of Architecture degree from the University of Washington and a Bachelor of Arts degree from Dartmouth College. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today. And then finally, I'd like to welcome Rebecca Wold. Rebecca is the Director of Real Estate Partnerships for Habitat Seattle-King County. She has a law degree and a master's in science in real estate development from the University of Washington. Rebecca has years of experience working on affordable homeownership opportunities with communities throughout the Puget Sound area. She has also recently joined Habitat to expand Habitat's work right here in King County and Kittitas County with community partners on developing more opportunities for affordable homes throughout the county. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks, Jim.
Awesome. So what we're going to do today, as we saw in our agenda, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the vision, some of the issues, if you will, or challenges facing the faith communities as they look into helping to address or tackle this affordable housing crisis that we're facing right here in the Puget Sound region. So we'll kick it off by starting with Kristen and ask her to help us share a little bit about her vision for affordable housing, especially the role of the faith community in terms of engaging community and providing community services. Kristen?
Well, hello, everybody. Bothell United Methodist Church has been in this community for over 135 years, and we've always been a congregation that's paid attention to the needs in our area. So our vision for the project that we're doing now that we're calling the Bothell Urban Project was driven by a series of focus sessions and meetings and an awareness of the growing needs in our community, particularly around the issues of housing and homelessness. As a faith community, we care about people that are pushed aside, ignored, or not cared for by the public. And we knew we had to do something for people that needed housing. We also recognized years of disparities and a history that created this wealth gap, which means a lack of financial security for many people. Our vision for this project was formed knowing that people needed housing, but also access to human services and a place to build and develop community. And so our Bothell Urban Project includes all of these things.
That's really awesome. What a great vision and what a great history that Bothell UMC has with the local community. So let's go to Jess for a second here and talk a bit about the role that faith-based communities play in addressing the affordable housing. Why is it so important, Jess, to you personally and to your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So having a home that is affordable, stable, healthy, and safe gives a foundation and people the opportunity to thrive. And for generations, racist policies and practices have dictated where and how Black, Indigenous, and other people of color have been able to live, which has created huge disparities in education, jobs, health outcomes, and life expectancy. The US has a shortage of 7.3 million rental homes that are affordable and available to renters with extremely low incomes, which is just the people who are at or below 30% of the area median income, let alone people in more middle incomes who are still struggling. In Washington alone, there are only 28 affordable and available rental homes for every 100 extremely low income renter households. So it's an extreme shortage. So building and preserving affordable homes for all is really critical to ensuring healthy people and communities. And we at Enterprise really see the faith community being able to contribute to this through careful consideration and discernment, and to be able to facilitate healthier communities through the use of their land.
You know, and I think it's kind of interesting. Yesterday, sadly, I had to go, a friend of mine injured himself and he had to go to an emergency room. And I was talking to the nurse treating this person. And I was saying, what's the story with your, home ownership? Where do you have to live? And she has essentially a 2-hour commute one way that she has to drive daily to come into Overlake Medical Center. And this is an important person that you need to have in your community: nurses, police, people who are essential to your community are these kinds of people that we're talking about here, that they cannot afford to live in this particular area. So that's a great point you're making there, Jess. Rebecca, as a seasoned practitioner here of developing and building affordable housing, what's your advice that you can share about with faith communities in terms of partnering with affordable housing developers, just like Habitat for Humanity?
Thanks, Jim, for that question, and hello, everyone. I think what's important is that the community really come together around their values and what they want to achieve. There's a lot of different options here. There's a whole menu of options, everything from if you have an extra piece of land as a community you want to sell, that you can then take those resources and invest them into benefiting the community through housing. If you want to partner with a developer in either rental or in a permanently affordable home ownership, that's an option. If you want to become involved in advocating for policy and funding for affordable housing that will help impact the community, all of those things can help. But what's important coming into the conversation is just where you as a community are, what your values are, and how to put those into practice. And once you have those in place, it will be easier for you to select the partner that's the right one for you to work with, and the choices that can lead to the best result for you and the community.
Okay. And it's important to note that Habitat has such a huge amount of experience with this. So that's a very noteworthy comment there. And we'll get more into that a little bit later with you, Rebecca. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the challenges faced by developers and faith communities with regards to this affordable housing challenge. Let's take it from Kristen's perspective. What are some of the challenges, Kristen, facing faith communities today? Let's take it from that perspective.
Right. Well, we know that we're in a time and place where people are falling away from the institution of church, but not necessarily their faith. And so that means that, many faith communities have this property and they're trying to figure out how to care for aging buildings, or too much property for their congregations as their congregation numbers go down. But younger people particularly want to be involved in something exciting that has a purpose. So while they may be falling away from the institution, they may not be falling away from their faith. And so in looking a way to live out their faith, faith communities doing something like partnering with affordable housing developers may be something that's something that they'd be seeking, something exciting that they would want to be involved with. So faith communities that are trying to be a part of, not separate from their geographic communities, have these opportunities to really rethink their building and their land use. Some are selling outright and using those financial resources to create housing with density in other places with worship and flexible spaces. Or they can reconfigure their current spaces to add other community resources and even some income to provide a more activated space in where they already are located. And I will say that for us at Bothell United Methodist Church, this evaluation of our resources and what we have to put towards creating affordable housing has actually really energized the people that are looking for this sort of intentional focus and a way to really live out actively our faith. And it also attracts the eyes of other faith communities and other people in the community to look at a church as a place that has real relevance and is able to do this kind of work in the community.
That's really great. That's awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Jess, how about yourself? What are some of the complexities now, if we take a look from the perspective of enterprise community partners? Your team has done phenomenal work in terms of working with the faith-based communities here in the Puget Sound area. What are some of the complexities that you see rising up from taking on such an initiative like this?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest complexities is really that discernment piece, figuring out how you as a congregation want to steward your land moving into the future. Sometimes there's not always agreement among the members of a congregation. So as Kristen and as Rebecca were saying, wanting to ensure that everyone's on the same page and that you're really looking at your values as a congregation is really key. And then there's community engagement, both within your congregation as well as the larger community and the neighborhood around you. I mean, I think like with that discernment piece, the communication that is happening within your congregation is really important to make sure that people are really following the process and know what's happening. And y'all at Bothell UMC have a great way of including people and informing people of the process. And I think that's really exciting. The financing and operations of affordable housing are very complex. I put that at the top of the pile. So being a landlord is not easy. And it's probably not in the wheelhouse of most faith communities. So I think development is really hard, but it pales in comparison to the actual operation of affordable housing. So that's where finding a really good partner can be a really important piece of the process for you as an organization. And so our goal at Enterprise is to help faith leaders become comfortably conversant in the real estate development process. We published a report that outlines some of the things that's important to understand when considering whether to repurpose faith-owned land to create affordable homes. And I think that link is going to get put in the chat. So you can download that paper and read it. It's a really good sort of intro. We're also really close to releasing a faith-based development guide, which will be a tool that helps walk faith leaders through the development process, understand what questions to ask, as well as who you need to have on your team. And at the bottom of the page of the link, there will be a newsletter subscription where you can sign up and we will be able to notify you when that faith-based development guide comes out if you're interested.
That's really great. Those resources are phenomenal that your team has put together. And having been one of the participants in the training that Enterprise Community Partners has put on, it was indeed a great experience. So I think this particular report will really do a great job summarizing a lot of those insights and be very helpful to a lot of the people interested in this. That's great, Jess. Thank you so much. Okay, well, let's now, we shift from challenges now. Let's go into some of the solutions, and then we'll get to our case studies. Again, the potential solutions that we're talking about here for faith-based communities are uniquely positioned to provide developers and others who are dealing with manageable, affordable housing. They're uniquely positioned to provide various different opportunities, let's say, to pull that all together. So Rebecca, let me allow you to speak a little bit more clearly about that than I just tried to. Can you describe some of the options that faith communities should be considering when it comes to opportunities to tackle this affordable housing situation?
Sure. So I think this goes back to the discernment and process that Jess was talking about. There's a lot of different options available to a community depending on what the resources that community have are. I'll use Bothell United Methodist Church as an example. They had and Reverend Kristen's going to talk more about this, their project, but in that case, they had a surplus piece of property they weren't using anymore as a community that was zoned for minimal development. So they decided this was not the impact they wanted to achieve. That wouldn't achieve the maximum impact that they wanted. And so what they did in that case is they were able to sell that piece of property to a market rate developer, take that money, and then they will reinvest that in another parcel, another project that will achieve the full vision that the community has. In other cases, you can sell the entire property that the church is on and redevelop the church's space to more suit what the future looks like. If your congregation is shrinking and you need a more manageable, less maintenance driven space that more suits your congregation's future, it can be part of that future development. You don't have to leave your property to have a different space. Or in some cases, you keep your original building, but beside it is a new development that helps serve the community. And this can be an opportunity for your church community to have a broader community even closer by and to really integrate that into the church's functions, either through being part of supportive services or more informally just in a community social aspect. So there's a lot of different options available. The church can continue to own its land and lease it to a developer for a long-term land lease. Many different options. What's most important in coming into it is just knowing what you as a community need going forward, what you're really looking to achieve. And then with your partner, explore what best suits that opportunity in your space.
Yeah, great. There is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach to this, is there? So let's take Kristen, in your case here, what are some of the tips that you have for engaging your congregation, the congregation of BUMC, and the community in general with regards to these affordable housing crisis and these situations that we're discussing here?
Yeah. One obvious thing about a congregation is we're already a group of people. And so in that group of people, how are we going to work together towards our stated purpose? Knowing that there's various gifts and talents and resources. So we're a ready-made group of stakeholders, and we don't want to underestimate that. My tips are, tip number one is to talk about how solutions to affordable housing is aligned with your faith community mission and purpose. So our mission is becoming Christ in the community with our goals of transformed people, transformed relationships, and transformed conditions. And when we talk about transformed conditions, we realize that in stories of how God has a beloved community as our future, that would mean housing for people. And so we had a lot of conversations about how housing really is in alignment with what we're trying to do as a church. When we talk about other community needs, because there's a lot of them, where do we focus? Our community decided housing would need to come first to offer stability for people. And then not that there's secondary needs, but that with those other needs, those are better dealt with when people are stably housed. So we really wanted to be a part of the housing solution for people to come into relationship in community with community and to transform conditions. So tip number 2 is to make sure that the congregation is educated on the dilemma that we're living in right now, making it personal, talking about their kids, their grandkids, and themselves, even as they age. You know, the housing costs compared to income levels, that disparity is bigger than it has historically been. And so people that have been in housing for a long time may need to be refreshed about what's really happening now and how it's different than it was, 40 or 50 years ago. So the congregation needs to be educated on the current status of our housing dilemma. Our tip number 3 is to use the congregation's knowledge to discover what connections and networks are already there. Does this congregation lean into fundraising? There's a congregation that has this huge rummage sale every year, and the proceeds of that go to Habitat for Humanity. That's the way that they fund affordable housing in that congregation, because they love that rummage sale and fundraising idea. I think Rebecca mentioned earlier, advocacy, zoning and funding. Our jurisdictions that we're all in have power that can help or hinder the creation of affordable housing. So can your congregation get involved in advocacy and connecting the idea that we're using our resources to make sure that everyone has what they need. If you're in a Christian congregation, you can point them to Acts 2 verses 44 and 45 to remember how the church began. And tip number 4 is to use the space that you have now to hold community forums to broaden the conversation and the support. Let the community know that this is a part of who you are. Invite the community in there's a lot of workshops around like this one where you could invite the whole community in to learn about affordable housing and what the needs are, to educate the community, yours and the one that surrounds your physical location, to engage people with your faith community, let them know that this is a part of who you are. And then my tip number 5 is form a team. We formed a team of people that were passionate about housing, that cared about creating this change in our community, and we meet every other week. And it's a really great way to keep our project on track and also to make sure that there's communication to and from the congregation. So those are my 5 tips.
Those are great tips. All of those are so helpful. Thank you, Kristen, for that. Now what we'll do is we're going to take a look at some of the solutions for faith communities. Before we do that, though, I'd like to ask our attendees to think carefully about questions that you might have and use the question and answer box on the webinar, on the Zoom webinar. And what we'll do is we'll be asking, those questions of our experts here as we get to the conclusion here. So looking for those questions. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these case studies, and we'll get down into some of the really interesting case studies of real life affordable housing situations that have been worked with closely by various different faith communities. So Jess, do you want to start us off with St. Luke's?
Sure. So St. Luke's Episcopal Church in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle is over 100 years old and was looking at an aging physical infrastructure on a large portion of land right in the center of Ballard. So they're located just across the street from Ballard Commons Park and just north of the Ballard Library, just to give you a sense. So right in the middle of everything. And so over the course of several years, the congregation discerned that they wanted to look at other ways to serve their community. They already run a soup kitchen and have lots of community organizations using their space. But looking at their physical property needs, they wanted to make sure that they were set up for the future and were able to continue serving the community in an even more meaningful way for them. So with their 55,000 square feet of land, so that's over an acre, they were able to partner with 2 development organizations. So one is Bridge Housing, which is a nonprofit affordable housing developer that works on the West Coast. And the other is Security Properties. And so they were able to basically identify the opportunity to develop 84 permanently affordable family size apartments, serving families up to 60% of the area median income that Bridge Housing will develop. And then Security Properties will develop 206 market rate units, with 20% of those units affordable at 60 to 80% of the area median income, which can be a really difficult affordability range to find. And that's through the Seattle multifamily tax exemption program. And they're also building a new church facility on the ground floor of the market rate building. And the church will be getting a long-term land lease revenue payment out of the development from the market rate units. So all in all, almost 300 new homes, especially family-sized homes, right in the center of Ballard. This is the first sort of family-sized unit development happening in Ballard in a really long time. So very exciting.
That's really great.
And we'll go to the next one, which is in Columbia City, the Columbia City Church of Hope, which is a Lutheran church. And they are partnering with El Centro de la Raza, which is a nonprofit organization that was founded on Beacon Hill. El Centro de la Raza means the center for all races. And they serve primarily the Latino population, but really everyone. And this will be their second new affordable housing development. There will be 87 permanently affordable apartments. Again, for people up to, for households up to 50% of the area median income. Residential support services that El Centro will provide. They provide a lot of social services to the community. And they also have an award-winning early learning program called the Jose Marti Child Development Center, where they'll have several classrooms in the ground floor of this building. And then there will also be a new space for the Columbia City Church of Hope. So this is a really great opportunity for the community to see kind of the real impact. And I love the name of this building will be the Beloved Community Four Amigos. The Four Amigos were four civil rights activists in the 1960s and 70s in Seattle that were multicultural and really were fighting for so much change that we still have yet to see. So I think it's really an ongoing legacy.
That's a great story there, and didn't realize the last bit of that there as far as the naming of the Four Amigos connection there. That's great.
And this one just broke ground about 2 weeks ago, so it's very exciting. It's on its way to being built.
Onward and upward. That's great. Thank you, Jess, for that. Maybe we'll switch over to Rebecca now and have Rebecca talk a little bit about a case study taking place over on the east side of Lake Washington.
Thanks, Jim. So Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Bellevue is located very near Factoria Boulevard, just above Factoria Boulevard near Factoria Mall. The church is very active, but their congregation is shrinking and their church facilities were aging. But what they did have was a 3-acre site. So what they identified as their goals were they really wanted to create permanently affordable housing. They wanted it to be home ownership. They also have a very active community participation in their community garden pea patch and their orchard, and they wanted to preserve those pieces of the property, both for their congregation's future use, as well as for the future residents of these new homes that were going to be created. And they needed a new church facility that would be smaller, easier to maintain, and better able to help the church move forward into the next phase of development, or phase of their congregation. So they partnered with Habitat for Humanity, and together we arrived at the design you see on the bottom of the screen here. So at the distance in the horizon here is the new church building. And there will be 25 new 3-bedroom family size homes. These are primarily attached duplex and triplex, though there are 2 ADU compliant homes so that we can serve those with disabilities in our family population as well. It's a very exciting new chapter for this church congregation. They really are excited to define what the future looks like for them and for the community. It's just begun in permitting. So we had our first community meeting about a month ago. And what was really interesting there is that the community members who hadn't heard really what was in the planning came with a lot of concerns about what this would look like. And they, by and large, left very happy with what the result will be, because they also recognize the need for the community to have more housing. And they were very excited to see this project be affordable home ownership. And Habitat's projects serve those who are at 80% of AMI and under, which for home ownership is a missing link, a missing piece of the puzzle. So these will be permanently affordable at or below 80% of AMI. Most of our families are right around 65% of AMI. So it's pretty exciting, especially in this location, to have this many new homes that were able to be created, and still to have the church have their own dynamic future preserved.
And Rebecca, in this case too, since it is home ownership, how does that work with Habitat in terms of managing the property and the buy and the sell of the homes, if you will?
Like I said, there's a lot of different ways to structure this. In this case, between the church and Habitat, what made the most sense was that this property will be divided, and the church will own the piece of property that their new building is located on, and the rest of the property will transfer to Habitat via an LLC. So the way Habitat's projects are structured, we have the land that's held as a permanent land lease. Basically, it's a 99-year land lease. And then each individual homeowner owns the home on the land. That helps us make it permanently affordable. But Habitat does all of that management down the line of that affordability. When a homeowner is ready to sell, we buy the home back, and then we sell it again to another family that needs it and qualifies. So the church will, in this case, the church will own the parcel of land that their building stands on at the end of the project, once we get to that point.
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, as we can see too, from these case studies, there's not a one size that fits all, but they're all very interesting in the way that they address the needs of the church, it seems, first, and then the affordable housing that is the outcome of that need. So that's
yeah. And the other thing I'll say, in this case, the church also receives that new building. So that's the compensation for their land, and the financial viability for their future church is this church building as well.
It's a great story. That's a great one. And you mentioned that you're permitting now. You're in the permitting process on this one?
Just started.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll look forward to that one. Okay, very good. Let's switch gears once again, and let's take a look at one more case study. Kristen, would you like to talk a bit about Bothell United Methodist, our church?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Rebecca pointed out is this idea of land lease and ground lease. It's never as simple, or it doesn't have to be as simple as just buying and selling. There's ways to transfer ownership in different ways, whether it's for the building or for the land. And that's something that we were able to learn. So we had land in our current location. We're staying in our current location as a church building. But off of our parking lot, we had this surplus land that we weren't optimizing its use. And so we sold that land, and we didn't just sell it outright. We sold it to a developer with the stipulation that in each of the houses, because we're in a single family housing zoning, they each had to have an accessory dwelling unit in each of those 5 homes. And so what that did, it didn't necessarily make those single family homes more affordable, but what it did is it added 5 smaller residences in those, what they're calling casitas, so that for the long term, that adds 5 more smaller units right here. That's what we could do right here. But what we did is we've taken the money that we got for that sale of that property and have put it into the vision for this future in downtown Bothell, where more density is allowed. And so we knew we could create something denser and higher and more impactful in the downtown area. In the city of Bothell owns a lot of surplus land that they haven't determined yet what goes on it. But this particular property is in an affordable housing overlay. It's near services. It's on transit. It's in a great location for multifamily housing and will fit right in with what's already in that downtown neighborhood. And so what you can see there, we partnered with Habitat and with Bridge Housing because the property that we're looking at is 73,000 square feet. We're asking the city to invest the property into this project. And if you could see the little, well, they're townhomes on the right side of the screen over there. There will be 10 of those townhomes that fit right along what's already in that neighborhood, which will be owned by Habitat. And then the large building is by Bridge. It's 144 units from 50 to 80% AMI. And on the ground floor is a community gathering space, an indoor space where we anticipate and envision activating in a way that really builds community for everyone. It will also include a retail restaurant space that has a goal of training employees to offer people that are finding it difficult to be employed, maybe exiting the homeless system or the legal system in some way. I will offer training for them. We'll also have office space for human services offices. We're in an area that's known as a desert of human services, and we need access for the community court system and for just everybody to have a place where they can walk in and access some social services. So those will be there as well. So this is currently in the process of discussion with the city council and the city of Bothell. This is a big, exciting vision that people love the idea. We just need to find a way to move forward on this and get it moving. It's a very slow process, but we're really excited about it.
That's great. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, everyone here at this particular panel discussion. We're at the point here now where we want to open it up to a Q&A with the audience here. If your questions that you might have to ask of Rebecca, to ask of Jess, to ask of Kristen about their perspectives on affordable housing. And as we look to the questions, I have one here that I'll start with. Maybe start with Kristen. Based on what you know now, are there ideas or approaches or different approaches that you might have taken at the outset of the project at Bothell United Methodist?
I've talked with other churches in this long journey that we've been on who already own their land. We're doing this transfer of, we don't actually own the land. We're trying to get ownership of the land. So you have to know, what your resources, you have to have a pretty clear idea about what your resources have and what your vision is and how you're going to get there. Jim, I often say I'm glad I didn't know a lot of things at the beginning. Yeah. Because if I knew it all up front, we might not have moved forward. I would just say, have faith that there are people that want this to happen. And cannot underestimate the partnerships. You don't have to know everything. You just have to have the passion and the vision and the desire and have it fit in. So what I wish I'd known at the beginning, I guess, is what we're living out, which is trust the process and also patience. I guess I wish I had really understood how long it takes. I heard it took a long time, but we're living it now. And so I guess I wish I would have known that a little bit more.
I think the faith point is a really good point there. You've got to have faith. And then the second one is one that I've often reflect back to my dad, and he used to always say, a good idea, no matter all the odds against it, if a good idea is a good idea, it will prevail over time. So, that kind of is, those are words of wisdom there.
And wait, I've got one more. My sister told me, what is it? Once begun is half done.
Yeah.
Get started, do something, don't do nothing. That's
Amen to that. Okay, we have another question, Jess, and this is getting kind of down into the weeds a little bit here, but how about talking a bit about the importance of setting up, things like a 501c3 or, the ideas of, we talked about it earlier, which was the, the various different joint relationships, the joint partnerships and so on. What's the importance of this, especially when you think about the faith community's involvement?
Right. So I think it's important to recognize that, every faith community has a different situation, right? And you might have an existing 501c3 that is part of an additional mission that you work on in the community. But generally a 501c3 nonprofit organization can access different kinds of funds than are available to many faith organizations. So any housing development is going to require a separate legal entity. And that I think means it's a really important reminder that it's important to look at who you have on your team, what skill sets, and where you might need to bring in additional expertise from outside. So, having a development consultant, having an owner's representative, having a land use attorney, are all really good folks to have on your team, whether that is somebody you have maybe in your congregation or not. So I know Bothell UMC has some really great congregants and other volunteers that are working on their committee, right? And so you all have a really great bench, if you will, but I think that's not necessarily the case. So especially when it comes to thinking about partnering with an affordable housing developer, it's important to have your congregation, your organization's interest represented. So having those consultants on your team is going to be really important when you are thinking about, as you're moving through the process.
And again, Rebecca, along the same lines, maybe from the habitat perspective, how do you ensure this long-term affordability for the homes that you create for your clients, if you will? Maybe you can dive into that a little bit and share some insights there. We're getting questions.
Sure, Jim. I think this is a really good question because a lot of people don't realize that you can have permanent affordability with homeownership as well. Habitat does it in a very specific way. We not only subsidize the initial price so that it's affordable, so we do that through making sure that we keep our construction costs as low as possible. We try to get the land at as low a price as possible. We bring in whatever available subsidies there are from the state, county, city, so that we can bring that initial price down as low as we can. And in any case, whether we bring our own, we also bring our own habitat donors generosity into the equation, and we make sure that every buyer pays only what they can afford, which is at no more than 35% of their total monthly income goes to housing costs, including their home mortgage as well as other costs associated with their housing. So initially, we make sure that first price is affordable. And then all of our homeowners agree that the price of their home will only appreciate by 1.5% a year. This is generally, especially in recent years, been a lot below what market appreciation is. But this does give that buyer, even that first buyer, a return when they sell their home in 5, 10, 15 years. They will get some money that will help them secure their next home. But also it keeps it low enough so that the next buyer also gets a home that they can afford. And what Habitat does is we buy back that home, we repair it, and then we resell it to a family again at a price that they can afford.
Yeah. Oh, that's really great. That's very straightforward too. What an amazing organization, Habitat is for doing this. Well, this has really been a good session here. I think we're actually at 45 minutes here. What I have up here, I say next steps, and we put up there, what's your dream? And I think that's kind of it when we think back to Reverend Kristen's early moments where we started thinking about this, and we were out there working with various different communities, thinking about this and what is the dream? What do you have for your vision for your faith community? And the good news is, as you can see from this session today, is that there's a lot of people here that are ready, willing, and able to help you kind of weave your way, if you will, through the labyrinth of legal and real estate and all the various different issues in terms of property management and so on. So I hope you gain that confidence from this session today, that we have some really excellent people here and excellent knowledge about how this process works. So keep thinking about that and keep working on your dream and trying to articulate that. I think from a conclusion standpoint, I'll just want to repeat it one more time. That, if there's a specific action or call to action from this session, it's to take some time and maybe schedule one-on-one with us at BUMC or with Enterprise Community or Habitat about the way forward for your approach to this affordable housing initiative. There are people out here willing and able to help you kind of, again, get you through that initial knothole. And maybe with that experience, you can shorten your time frames too, in terms of realizing that dream. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for today. I'd like to thank the attendees for joining us today. I'd like to thank Rebecca Wolf from Habitat, sharing her expertise. I'd like to thank Jess Blanche from Enterprise Community Partners. She's been phenomenal through all these different interactions we've had with her. Thank you, Jess. And of course, Reverend Kristen Joyner, thank you for your inspiration and leadership for the program that we have here. And I'd like to thank our sponsor once again, Habitat for Humanity. It's a great team to work with, and we appreciate their support. So have a great day, everybody. And we will talk to you all soon.
Thanks.
See y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.